Now that we know what one-to-one functions are, let's talk about inverse functions because those two have a correlation. I have highlighted here, it says if a function is one-to-one, then it will have an inverse. And the inverse of f of x is written as this notation right here, the inverse of x. So the functions f and g are inverse functions if whenever the pair AB satisfies y equals f of x, then the pair B comma A satisfies y of g of x. So if my f and g function are inverses of each other, then all these ordered pairs are going to switch places with each other. So example 3 says determine if the function f is defined by the arrow diagram has an inverse. If it does, create an arrow diagram that defines the inverse. If it does not, explain why. So what we need to look at is, does anything repeat? Well, here in my domain, I have one line going from 2, 5, 3, and 7. So in my domain, nothing repeats. Then I look at my range. We have one arrow going to 3, to 4, to 1, to 8. So again, nothing repeats. So when nothing repeats in my domain and in my range, then that means yes, this function here has an inverse. So that's half of this question here. Determine if the function defined by the arrow diagram has an inverse. So we have determined it has an inverse because it is one-to-one, because my domain doesn't repeat and because my range doesn't repeat. So it goes on to say, if it does, create an arrow diagram that defines the inverse. So to make this inverse here, I'm going to make my domain circle. And I will make my range circle. Okay, so for every pair AB in the inverse, the ordered pair BA is going to be. So what that means is I'm going to take my domain numbers, 2, 5, 3, and 7, and that's going to become my new range. Then I'm going to take my range column, and that becomes my new domain. So we've got 3, 4, 1, and 8. And now those all map across. So this would be my picture of my domain. And I guess we could even label that as f to the, not f prime, let's go f to the -1. So here is my function, here is its inverse. Let's look at part B here. In my domain, we have one arrow going from 4, 8, 13, and 18. So my domain is good, but however, we do have only one going to each of these numbers. But if you notice here, we have 2 7s in this range. So because my 7 repeats, that means this doesn't have an inverse. Okay, and it does go on to say if it doesn't explain why, but there's my explanation, because the 7, because we have a number in that range that repeats, that means it is not one-to-one, and if it is not one-to-one, then it doesn't have an inverse.